I want to start with the difference between hunger and having an appetite and cravings.
The simplest way to think about it is when you're sitting at dinner and you had this amazing dinner, appetizer, drinks, entree, and you are full. You're ready. You're ready to go. And the waiter comes out and says, actually, you know what? We have these special desserts that we just made tonight, and they are out of this world. And everyone looks at each other and they're like, well, we're full, but we really want that dessert. That's cravings.
Oh,
That's not hunger. You're no longer hungry.
yeah.
You're actually pretty full, extra full, right? But you're working on that cravings pathway. And that cravings pathway is super strong. It's the same cravings pathway that alcohol uses, drugs, sugar, so desserts. So cravings is a dopamine pathway,
Huh.
whereas hunger is your natural need to get nutrients. Hunger, actually, you can go for many days, even a month without food.
A month?
Yes. People fast for a month. From my background, my family is Jain, and they fast for long periods of time. And there is a fasting month where you actually eat nothing and just drink water. So our hunger signals are reminders to eat because your body does not want you to go a full month without remembering to eat. So ghrelin, you might have heard of this hunger hormone. It's released to remind us to eat. So the same time every day, you get hungry, you get reminded to eat, and your ghrelin comes and goes. So some people just aren't hungry, in the morning. Some people get very hungry at night, no matter what they've eaten all day because of that ghrelin cycling. So if you understand that it's a cycle, it's a reminder. You don't always have to take that reminder, but it's a reminder. So if you need food, you should get it. But
Huh. So what is appetite?
appetite is the overall interest in food. Have you ever seen a dog when they're sick? They're just like not interested. Their appetite is dampened. It will dampen your cravings and your hunger pathways
Huh.
to
Okay.
let you heal, right?
So hunger is like this need to eat,
Yes.
right? That is tied to the biological imperative to stay alive. Appetite is the desire for food.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all had those periods in our life where we've felt sick. I mean, my allergies are crazy right now, and I'm not that hungry.
Yes.
Normally, I would be ravenous right now.
Yes.
So my appetite
Is
is the correct
Yes.
word. I don't
Yes.
have much of an appetite. And then cravings, this is one of the reasons why I love your book, I'm So Effing Hungry, so much, because I've learned so much that I didn't know, that you talk so much about our cravings and the eating patterns that we have that aren't healthy for us based on the brain, not based on emotion, not based on what's going on with what you just ate, but that actually there is a whole hormone cycle to this thing.
Oh, it's so complicated. So there was a French philosopher in 1825, Jean-Claude Savarin, and he said, show me what you eat and I'll show you who you are. And even today, that stands true, right? Show me what you eat and I'll tell you who you are. Because our lives are dictated through food. We have now food addictions. And some of it is not our fault. A lot of it is not our fault.
Yeah, you actually say that in this book, that you say that, you get into these sort of habits of eating unhealthy things, the pulling up at the drive-through and ordering the extra large fries and the burger on the way home from work, and then you feel like crap, and then you have a craving, and then you eat something else, and that it's not your fault. How is it not your fault if you're the one putting the food in your mouth?
Think about it. Have you ever been to Miami? I always talk about
Yes.
the Miami phenomenon, okay? When you go to Miami, and the first time I went, I was in med school, and I saw all the flashing lights and the people and the music and the craziness, and I was like, oh my God, my dopamine receptors were firing.
Yep.
That's what happens the first time you eat a sugary food, like an ice cream or a McDonald's burger. You get a huge burst of dopamine. And then on day 3 of being in Miami, all of a sudden, it doesn't seem loud. It doesn't seem as entertaining. You need to turn the volume up. You need to
Yeah.
go to the club now because you're kind of used to it. You don't even feel excited or happy just from being out in the street. You actually need to turn up the volume. And so that's what's happening to us. We're having this Miami South Beach effect in our brains when we're eating all of this sweet food, these processed foods that they don't occur in nature. That dopamine explosion happening day after day after day, it lowers you're not even as happy anymore. And so the problem is you need more and more and more to get that same dopamine release. And guess what happens, Mel, on the other end?
I don't know.
Dopamine has this weird after effect where it makes you irritable, it makes you uncomfortable, and it makes you crave that food so badly that you just want to like almost make yourself not feel the pain anymore. And so dopamine has this effect on us that we'll eat it, we'll get the pleasure, but then there's like that pain aspect to it.
Because you want it again.
You want it
There was
again.
something that you just said that really caught my attention. I've never heard anybody say this before. It's that you get the dopamine rush from eating things that are not available in nature.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
When you eat an apple,
Yes.
you get the sugar,
Yep.
but you get water, electrolytes, antioxidants,
Yeah.
and fiber,
Yes.
most importantly. That is how sugar is made in nature. So you see a fruit tree, your dopamine pathway, we think was made to help us survive and want to find that tree with the ripe fruit, to keep us going, to keep us agitated enough to like try to look for more food just to keep us surviving.
Okay.
Now take it, thousands of years later, we have ultra processed foods, which I will define for you later, that don't have any fiber, that don't have any vitamins to tell the body that you've eaten something. And they pack the sugar in such a small amount of food that the explosion of dopamine you get is similar to a drug like
Right.
cocaine.
Or being in South Beach.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like, boom.
Boom.
And then you have a drop, and then you crave the candy bar or the whatever it was that you just had that was ultra processed. So what does ultra processed mean?
Ultra processed is really simple. If you could not make it in your kitchen or any kitchen because the ingredients are not ingredients of food, then it's ultra processed. Ultra processed means you cannot recreate that food in your kitchen, even if you had access to any ingredient in the world. So
Wow.
that's a lot of things, Doritos, Kit Kats, sundaes. If you think about it, we have often the option of getting the minimally processed or non-processed version, but it's often easier. The shelf life is easier when they're in packaged foods, but the ingredients in there, we don't even know exactly what each one of them does. We just know that when you consume them at the highest quantities, you have 80% more mental health days than someone who's consuming the lowest quantities.
Okay. So I want to make sure that everybody just heard that. So one of the reasons why this is so important, and we're going to keep digging into the connection between your cravings and your appetite and your hunger and how this is attached to dopamine.
Yeah.
The rush of dopamine, the drop of dopamine, the craving cycle that you're now trapped in. But you just said that if you eat more whole, naturally occurring foods, that you will be 80% better when it comes to the number of days that you are feeling good mentally. Is that
Yes.
true?
Yes.
Why?
We are starting to understand that ultra processed foods not only make us more inflamed, which
Yep.
we can talk about why inflammation is bad, but it ages you, gives you cancer, diabetes, heart disease. That's the root of all of it. It makes you sad, anxious, and it lowers your length of life. Like, so if you look at all-cause mortality, ultra processed foods will shorten your life. And yet, Mel, we live in a world where kids are eating over 70% of their diet is ultra processed.
Wow. I think I got to back up a minute and just, and because there's so much to learn. This book has so much research in it, and it also has so many what you call hunger hacks, which I love. And I want to start with some basic questions. You said this thing earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm almost like embarrassed to ask this question. How do you know when you're full?
It's such a good question. We've forgotten, right, what it feels like to be hungry or be full. We're almost always just relying on external cues to tell us that. So there's various ways to feel full. So we have a couple of hormones that make us feel full. Leptin is one of them. CCK is another one. And there's various signals that they give our brain, mostly just to stop eating. And so if you feel full, you won't want to eat food. However, the cravings pathway kicks in. So you may want to eat desserts, but you won't want to eat real food. So a quick way to test this is, would you eat a bowl of vegetables right now?
Right now? No.
Then you're not hungry.
Oh, so can you explain to us what is going on in our bodies as it relates to feeling hungry?
We now know, Mel, that our brain is not just in charge of our cravings and our mood and the way we show up in the world. We always think, oh, if you feel sad, you should just think, do therapy or start to think good thoughts.
Right.
But we now know that there's this connection between the brain and the gut.
Mm-hmm.
And when you eat food, there's an impact in your gut that's sent directly to your brain. And your brain then sends signals back down to your gut. And the way you show up in the world is a result of this communication.
And what is the chicken or the egg in the brain gut? Like, who goes first? Who's talking the loudest?
Okay, so when we are formed, when we're an embryo, they're connected.
Mm-hmm.
They're one. And then they stretch out and they move apart to the different ends of the body.
Yep.
So you could say that they kind of happen from one ball of cells.
Yep.
And we can definitely say now with we can definitely say with confidence that changing our gut environment has a bigger impact on our brain than we ever thought. A bigger impact, so big that you can transplant the gut from one person to another and completely change their mental health.
Oh, I read about that study.
Yeah.
Where they switched guts in, was it mice?
Yes.
Where mice that were schizophrenic.
Yes.
Well, you should say the study because I'm not the medical doctor. You are a doctor.
So we now know that the gut microbiome has so many signaling pathways to the brain, and sometimes the bacteria are louder, actually, than the brain, which is your question, like which one's louder?
Right.
If the gut bacteria want to send a signal to the brain, they produce large amounts of dopamine and large amounts of serotonin to send a signal. So what they found is if you took animals and you gave them the microbiome from a schizophrenic human person who was diagnosed, and then a microbiome from someone who was not diagnosed with schizophrenia, put that in mice into their gut, and you mix them up, the researchers were able to tell which mice got which gut bacteria just based on the behavior of the mice.
Based on the microbiome bacteria that they fed them?
Exactly.
So I want to get a visual here.
Yeah.
Because I can't stop thinking about the fact that everybody's obsessed with ChatGPT right now and AI and how you just insert this thing and it spits out that thing. This whole cover letter, this whole resume, this whole this. Wow, it's so unbelievable. I'm thinking in my mind, what I'm visualizing is I'll take what I ate for lunch. So I had a salad. I had a handful of walnuts. I had a couple scoops of a chocolate mousse keto thing. Delicious. I had a coconut macaroon. I had a keto chocolate peanut butter little cup thing. And I'm thinking that all of that represents input into like the chat GPT and then something else gets spit out. And what gets spit out from that is a message to my brain. Am I
That's
tracking right?
exactly what's happening. In fact, it's two ways. So you have to remember that our body's really smart. So they usually use two different pathways for each thing. So when you eat sugar, for example, it stimulates your brain straight from your mouth. And then you have these other receptors, these neuropods in the gut that sense the sugar also. And they are making their own assessment and sending it to the gut. So the gut's like, oh yeah, it's sugar because I knew it was coming because I felt it from the mouth.
Okay.
And now you guys are telling me the same thing. So everything matches and you get the response. So they like work together
Wow.
in understanding what's happening in your body.
Wow. It's amazing how sophisticated our
It is
bodies are.
amazing.
Like as I'm mindlessly chucking walnuts into my mouth, I'm not thinking about the fact that there are these neurotransmitters, there are these hormones, there's all this signaling going on. And so you, in your book, Dr. Amy, you write that if you're in a cycle of emotional eating, or if you're in a cycle where you have all of these cravings and you're always hungry and you're eating the wrong things, that it's not your fault.
It's not your fault.
And it's not your fault because your brain and your hormones are getting triggered by all this ultra-processed food.
Yes.
And the ultra-processed food, it sounds like, is food that also keeps you craving it
Yes.
because it's not occurring in the natural world. And so your brain is like, ding, 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 ding. Holy smokes. This Snickers bar is incredible. Oh my gosh. This baked whatever it is that I pulled out of a box and ripped out of a package and stuck in to the air fryer. This is tantalizing because it's got all these chemicals in it.
Yeah, it's the Miami Beach phenomenon, right? You get to South Beach and you're like, whoa, your brain is like, I feel good right now. And I want that again. And then I want more of that again.
Right.
And the problem with our world is we're not educated about that.
Right.
As a physician, I said to myself, how many times was I rewarding myself with Starbucks and, peppermint mochas? And I would say to myself, oh, I did a good job today, so I'm going to get this sweet thing. And then it was every day. And then it was twice a day. And by the end of it, I had to recognize myself that this was happening to me. We need to talk about it more because if we can make ourselves happier, less irritable, less chasing things, we're going to be happier people. We're going to live longer. And so for me, this was like, okay, all these companies know about it and they're creating foods to trigger that pathway. Why don't we know about it so we actually can be in control?
Well, when we hear food, you think calories.
Yeah.
You think like how many grams of fat, how many grams of sugar. I've never talked to anybody about the fact that there is this dopamine, serotonin, all of these hormones are impacted by it. And it's also being driven by this kind of craving cycle in your brain.
Yeah.
And so what do we do if we're not responsible for this situation? How the hell do we fix it? Like, where do we all begin?
Yeah. The thing is, first understand that food creates mood.
Food creates mood.
So we're always trying to find out ways to make ourselves happier,
Right.
think more clearly, be more satisfied, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I got so interested in this work, because with my background in nutrition and being a doctor, I thought, well, if we can control our mood through food and the actions that we take on a daily basis, why aren't we talking about this? Why isn't this first-line therapy? There's really good research, a new study from South Australia, that the combination of diet and exercise
Yep.
was 1.5 times more effective for depression than the leading medications.
Now explain why. Because that's a big research result that just through food and exercise,
Yeah.
it was found to be 1.5 times more effective than medication alone.
And if you think about it, they actually even put therapy and medications, kind of the traditional treatment, into one category.
Okay.
And they compared that with changing your diet, with changing your sleep, your exercise lifestyle habits.
Okay.
And they said we should be prescribing this as first-line therapy for depression. There's multiple anxiety studies, ADHD. I mean, we are missing the boat. Obviously, we're not doing something right because depression is skyrocketing, so is anxiety, so is obesity, so is diabetes, so is cardiovascular disease. So the status quo is not working. So why not employ these techniques and put them at the forefront? So things like we talked about in already and that are in the book are teaching you that we have control, that yes, do all the things, but also change the way you eat, change the way you exercise, get more sunlight.
Well, you might be depressed and anxious and struggling with a lot of stuff because of what you're eating
Yes.
and because of your lifestyle right now. And so I think it's really great news to hear that you can feel better if you start to eat better. And that this whole cycle that you are trapped in terms of the cravings that never end and the cycle of emotional eating and feeling lethargic and feeling anxious, that you can, based on the research and based on the work that you do with patients around the world, that when you take your food intake seriously, you can profoundly change your mood, you can change your body, you can change your lifestyle, all of it. But it begins with the food. These are the bane of my existence. Oh my God. Today, you and I are going to get real about cravings, appetite, hunger, how to rein in the emotional eating. You're finished with dinner. You promise yourself you're not going to eat something, and all of a sudden, boom, you got to have ice cream. What is that about?